They said Alexander the Great carried it with him through every battle, every storm, every sleepless night under foreign stars. A book so ancient, so forbidden, that even Aristotle warned him, knowledge beyond mortal grasp is a fire that burns its master first. But Alexander didn't care. He was not a man chasing kingdoms. He was chasing eternity. What was this book, and why did every copy vanish after his death? Some claimed it contained rituals of immortality, stolen from lost Babylonian temples. Others whispered it was a manual of divine kingship, the very secret that made gods from men. But all agreed on one thing: it was not meant for human eyes. It began in 336 BCE, when Philip II of Macedon was assassinated and his 20-year-old son, Alexander, ascended the throne. The boy who had once studied philosophy under Aristotle now sought to rule the world. But unlike any conqueror before him, Alexander wasn't just expanding an empire. He was following a vision. As a child, Aristotle had taken him through scrolls and relics hidden deep in Mises cave school. Among them was one peculiar codex, its script neither Greek nor Persian, written in a serpentine language no one could fully decipher. It was said to be older than Egypt's pyramids, older than Sumer, even older than the flood. Aristotle had acquired it from traders returning from the east, from lands near Bactria, where ancient fire temples spoke of a god named Zarvan, time without beginning or end. That codex, bound in blackened leather and marked with symbols of suns and serpents, was what Aristotle called the Book of the One Light. He told Alexander never to read it. He told him it was a curse disguised as wisdom. But young Alexander, obsessed with the idea that a man could become more than human, couldn't resist. On the night before his first campaign against Persia, Alexander summoned his most trusted general, Histale, and unveiled the book. The pages were brittle, smelling of smoke and oil. On the very first leaf was a single line written in strange golden ink. He who knows the source shall not perish when the stars fall. That line changed everything. From that day onward, Alexander began treating his conquests not as wars, but as pilgrimages. He told his generals that the world was not meant to be conquered. It was meant to be united under divine order. Every temple he visited, from Memphis to Babylon, he searched for symbols, suns, serpents, flames, hoping to unlock the meaning of that single line. When he reached Egypt, the priests of Ammon proclaimed him son of Zeus. Most thought it was flattery, but Alexander believed it. And according to one scribe, he whispered that the book had foretold it, that he was to walk among mortals as a god in flesh. As the campaigns continued, his men noticed something strange. Whenever Alexander entered a new city, he carried the book himself, never letting anyone else touch it. He slept with it beside his sword, and whenever illness or battle wounds threatened him, he would spend hours reading it by torchlight, murmuring verses no one could understand. After the victory at Tyre, Histale asked him what he sought from that book. Alexander's reply was chilling. I seek the river that runs beneath all worlds. If I find it, I will never die. But something darker began to unfold. His generals whispered that the book had changed him. He no longer trusted his advisors. He began wearing the diadem constantly, claiming dreams where ancient kings spoke to him. Some said the book was not guiding him. It was speaking through him. One night in Babylon, a scholar from Persia, brought to translate a section of the text, went missing. Only his notes remained, 3 lines hastily written before he vanished. The book is alive. It remembers. The reader becomes the vessel. The one light is not God, it is the end. When Alexander read those words, he ordered the notes destroyed and forbade anyone from ever mentioning the scholar again. And yet, he kept reading. Night after night, he read until his eyes bled from the lamplight. The man who once led armies across continents now seemed consumed by something invisible, something eternal. As the army pushed toward India, strange rituals began appearing in his camp. Small altars made of stone, circles drawn in ashes and blood, offerings of gold to the fire that never dies. Some believed Alexander had begun to reenact the rituals described in the book. Others claimed he was searching for a real place, a hidden mountain where the river of light flowed, said to grant eternal life. But what none could explain was how the book knew things it shouldn't. It described lands Alexander had not yet seen, rivers, deserts, even cities. It was as if it predicted his path. And then came the night at the banks of the Histale River, when a terrible storm tore through the camp. As lightning struck, a soldier swore he saw Alexander kneeling with the book open, shouting to the heavens in a language unknown. The next morning, the book was gone. Alexander's tent was burned, his eyes hollow, and his voice cold as stone when he said, "It has chosen me." From that moment, everything changed. The man who once sought to unite the world now pursued something else, something no human should ever desire. And those close to him began to fear that their king was no longer entirely human. The storm at Hydaspes River marked the beginning of the end, not just for Alexander's conquests, but for his humanity. In the weeks that followed, his army spoke of unearthly signs, the moon turning crimson, fires that would not burn out, shadows that moved without wind. They whispered that the book had awakened something, and it was following them. When dawn broke after that storm, the book had vanished. Alexander ordered every tent searched, every crate opened, every prisoner questioned. Nothing. Then, 3 nights later, his servant Ptolemy entered the king's tent to find the book sitting on the table, dry, clean, untouched by the storm. No one had brought it there. Alexander looked up, and for the first time he smiled, but it wasn't the smile of a man. It was the smile of someone who had seen eternity and was no longer afraid of death. From that night on, Alexander began to call the book the companion. He carried it into battle instead of a shield. He spoke to it as though it could hear. Some even claimed he began to quote its words as commands to his soldiers, verses that no one understood but somehow filled the men with terrifying courage. As his army pressed deeper into India, Alexander no longer sought conquest. He sought something hidden in the east, a temple said to lie beyond the mountains, where the fire of the source still burned. The local priests called it the Temple of Zarvan, the same god of infinite time mentioned by Aristotle years ago. Every step eastward brought more omens. Birds fell dead from the sky. His horses refused to move near certain valleys. And one night, Hephaestion, his most trusted friend, fell violently ill after touching the book. Alexander stayed by his side for 3 days, chanting, burning incense, and whispering into Hephaestion's ear words no Greek could understand. But on the 4th day, Hephaestion died. Witnesses swore that when his soul left his body, the pages of the book turned on their own, as though something had entered it. Alexander went mad with grief. He tore his robes, built a massive pyre, and declared Hephaestion a god. And then, before his men, he whispered, "The book promised I would not lose him." After that day, the Alexander they had known was gone. He stopped sleeping, stopped eating. He began drawing circles and symbols in ash, the same one seen carved into the book's cover. He believed Hephaestion was alive, trapped within its pages. And to bring him back, Alexander performed rituals he claimed were older than the gods. He isolated himself in a tent filled with burning lamps and copper bowls. No one was allowed to enter, not even his generals. But those who passed by swore they heard voices, many voices echoing from within, sometimes crying, sometimes whispering his name. When he finally emerged, his face was pale as marble, and his eyes glowed faintly in the dark. He told his men they would march no further, because he had found the gate. They built a camp near a river whose waters shimmered strangely under the moon. The priests accompanying him said it was the river of light, the one spoken of in the book's first line. He who knows the source shall not perish when the stars fall. Alexander ordered his men to construct an altar from black stones. He placed the book upon it and began a ritual. Torches circled him, forming a ring of fire. He cut his palm, let the blood drip onto the open page, and whispered, "Show me the source. Let me see what the gods hide." Then silence. No wind, no sound, only stillness. And from the river, a figure emerged. It wasn't human. It shimmered like molten gold, shifting between light and shadow, speaking in a voice that made the earth tremble. No one understood its words except Alexander, who fell to his knees and wept. When it vanished, he turned to his generals and declared, "I have seen the face of time. I am a chosen." From that moment, his men began to fear him more than they feared death. But with divine knowledge came a curse. Wherever Alexander went, death followed closer. Rivers dried overnight. Animals fled from his path. Even his most loyal officers started plotting to leave him, believing their king had gone mad. Yet Alexander seemed untouched by fear. He told them his body no longer obeyed the limits of men. When he was wounded in Mali, his blood ran thicker, darker. When doctors tried to treat him, the wounds closed faster than they should have. And the book, it changed too. Its pages now glowed faintly at night, as if breathing. He kept it wrapped in silk, carried by a single slave who never spoke again after touching it. Years later, Alexander marched west again, back to Babylon, carrying the book as his last prize. But those who saw him said he was not the same man who left. His hair had turned almost silver, his voice deeper, and his gaze cold, unreadable. In his dreams, he told his scribes he saw a city of glass and light, where no one aged, and time stood still. He believed he was close to finding it. He believed immortality was near. But something strange happened during his final days. The book began to refuse him. Its pages turned blank. No matter how much he begged, it would not reveal its secrets anymore. One night, he threw it into the flames, but the fire would not touch it. Instead, it shone brighter, humming softly, as if alive. And then, in a sudden rage, Alexander shouted, "If I cannot live forever, the world shall remember me as one who tried." The next morning, he fell ill, a fever that no healer could cure. And as he lay dying, the book rested by his bed, silent and still. But before his final breath, his eyes opened one last time. He looked toward the book and whispered, "It's done. The source has taken me." And then, the conqueror of the world was gone. The book vanished the same night. No one ever saw it again. But in the darkness of Babylon, the slaves claimed they heard a faint whisper, not in Greek, but in the same serpentine tongue. The fire has a new keeper. The night Alexander died in Babylon, the torches burned blue. His generals stood in silence around his lifeless body, a man who had once called himself a god, now lying still, the book gone without a trace. But his death was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of a mystery that haunted empires for centuries. Because every man who had seen that book, every one of them, met an unnatural fate. When Ptolemy, Alexander's closest commander, took his body to Egypt, he swore he saw a shadow following the funeral procession. Some nights, he claimed he could hear Alexander's voice whispering from the sarcophagus, not calling his name, but repeating the same words. "He who knows the source shall not perish when the stars fall." Historians later noted that Ptolemy, who founded the Ptolemaic dynasty, built an inner shrine beneath the library of Alexandria, sealed off from the public. Rumors said that deep within its catacombs, behind iron doors, he kept something locked away, something that glowed faintly in the dark. When Seleucus, another of Alexander's generals, marched east to claim Babylon, he too was obsessed with recovering the lost book. He sent explorers to the ruins of Zarvan's temple, but none returned. Their last message, carved onto a broken tablet found years later, read only, "The fire is not light, it is hunger." Centuries later, when the Romans conquered Greece, the story of Alexander's book resurfaced. Philosophers in Athens spoke of a hidden text, Codex Solis, the Book of the Sun. They believed it was the same object carried by the Macedonian king, said it contained the secret of life beyond decay. But when one scholar named Philostratus tried to reconstruct its verses from fragments, he was found dead in his study. Eyes burned, his manuscripts turned to ash, though the rest of the room was untouched. The last line he had written before his death read, "The fire does not consume, it transforms." Roman emperors heard of the legend and sought the book for themselves. Caligula ordered his priests to search for it in the east. Nero commissioned expeditions to Babylon, convinced it could make him immortal. None returned with it, but every expedition ended in the same way: madness, plague, and fire. Then came a chilling discovery in Alexandria, during the reign of Claudius. A scroll found inside a decaying chest contained notes written in ancient Greek, but the ink shimmered like molten gold. It spoke of the one light and the eternal flame of Zarvan. Scholars realized the handwriting matched Aristotle's. He had written, centuries before, of a forbidden codex from Bactria, warning that it contained cosmic truths not meant for men of flesh. If true, it meant Aristotle had known the book's nature all along, and had given it to Alexander intentionally, perhaps as a test. But what terrified historians most was Aristotle's last remark, half erased by time. The student has become the experiment. Over the centuries, the book appeared and disappeared, in Persia, in Byzantium, and later in the Islamic Golden Age. A few scholars, such as the mysterious Al-Makadisi, described a manuscript that glowed with the light of two suns. He wrote that it spoke of a river beneath all worlds, echoing Alexander's own words centuries before. But al-Makadisi was arrested by the Caliph of Baghdad and burned at the stake for heresy. His final cry, recorded by witnesses, was, "The book cannot be destroyed, it only sleeps." From that moment, history went silent. The book disappeared completely. Empires rose and fell. Libraries burned. And yet, whispers of the one light survived, in alchemical texts, in secret orders, and in fragments of medieval lore that spoke of a man who conquered death. In 1894, British archaeologists excavating Babylon unearthed a sealed stone vault beneath the ruins of Nebuchadnezzar's palace. Inside was a small blackened box wrapped in lead sheets. When they opened it, they found ashes and a single brass plate engraved with the same serpent and sun sigil once seen on Alexander's banner. No text survived, but the lead around it was warped, as if something had burned with impossible heat inside. A member of the expedition, Dr. Henry Forsyth, began having recurring dreams after that, visions of a man standing before a blazing river, holding a book that bled light. Forsyth went mad within months and disappeared during a voyage back to England. His journal, found later, contained one final note: "The fire has a new keeper." Today, historians debate whether Alexander truly carried such a book, or if it was a myth born from his obsession with divine destiny. But fragments across civilizations, Greek, Persian, Babylonian, and Arabic, all describe the same impossible artifact. Could it be that Alexander's conquests were never about empire at all, but about reclaiming something older than history itself? Something humanity was never meant to find? No one can say. But every legend, every whisper, ends the same way, with the same line that haunted Alexander until his final breath: "He who knows the source shall not perish when the stars fall." And so, somewhere between myth and truth, one question remains. What if the book never disappeared? only waited for the next conqueror.